Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Virtual Connect series. We are joining again on an important topic in our new environment that we're trying to adapt to, something where architects have a critically important role to play. Today's session is helping schools reopen for in-person learning during COVID. It's going to be led by VA Plus, a consulting division of Vertical Arts, which is a Colorado design firm. This session has been submitted for HSW credit and is pending approval. We'll make sure you get that credit once it does come through. As always, please use the Q&A function throughout today's presentation if you have questions for our speakers, and we'll get to those at the end. Now, allow me to introduce today's presenters. You see Brian on the screen. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Mike.
Patty is an AA member. He's a lead accredited professional, registered architect and division manager with over 20 years of professional experience. He's worked all over the world on a wide variety of project types. He and his firm are familiar with the latest BIM software, advanced workflows, and collaboration platforms. In addition to Brian, we have Adam Johnson. Have Adam come up. There's Adam. Hi, Adam. Thanks for joining us. Adam's originally from a small town in New York, and he moved to Denver in 2018 after graduating with his Bachelor of Architecture to embrace urban living, music, art, and the mountain lifestyle. Sounds great. Having worked in the field for 4+ years, Adam's worked on a wide variety of projects, ranging from single-family homes, educational facilities, skyscrapers, and super talls. And last but not least, Jonathan Resch.
Hi.
Hi, John. John studied architectural technology at Metro State University and developed BIM tools in C# and Dynamo. Welcome, Jonathan. So here's your team today who's going to talk about some lessons learned. And I'm curiously watching this because the school they first tried it out on is across the street from where I live. So it'll be an interesting session, not only for me, but for anybody who either has kids in school or works in this school market. We take it, on faith and hope that schools will reopen sometime soon and that we'll have a part to play in helping them to teach the next generation. So with that, I'll leave it to the team at VA Plus. Brian, Adam, John, take it away, and I'll see you soon with questions.
All right, thanks, Mike. What we've got here is a video. It's about 25 minutes long. We're going to go through how we got involved, some of the tools that we've developed, as well as some of the tools that are sort of off the shelf. All came about, because again, I'm a parent, and the first thing I was wondering is how the heck I was ever going to get my son out of school when dismissals happened. So it was somewhat self-centered, and also we ran across a tool that we all pay for if we pay for the AEC collection within Autodesk stuff. So Infoworks is something that is in there, and it allows you to do these micro simulations. A small part of the way that we went to solve this whole problem as far as trying to provide them with visions of how it is they could move students around, how we could determine social distancing and some things like that. So without further ado here, we're going to go ahead and we'll launch into this video, and you guys can be asking questions as we go along. We'll be available to start to see what the questions are, and like I said, it's 25 minutes long, so we'll be able to go in any depth or any direction you guys want to go once we get through it. And so the first question I have for everybody that's here right now is, has anybody, are you anticipating changing any of your designs, having to incorporate this new normal, if you will, depending upon what that becomes after vaccines or whenever we get to that? Just wondering if anybody's had any reactions to or thoughts and changes to their design process based upon COVID and what we're all having to do.
We are VA Plus, an innovative BIM consulting firm located in Denver, Colorado, with over 15 years of experience working on projects around the world to bring designers and clients' visions to fruition. Contact us today about our services, such as BIM modeling, BIM management, as-builts and conversions, scanning and point cloud services, custom solutions, and beyond. Learn more at vaplus.us. And thank you for watching.
Then our sort of second question, again, if, as far as, has any school approached you to help them implement, any in-person plans, things like that? Just wondering, again, is anybody having any pressures from clients and or people that they know to help solve this problem?
Hi, my name is Brian Patty. I'm a parent of a second grader, Wesley, who currently is attending school online. I'm also a registered architect in the state of Colorado. Our firm, VA Plus, is the BIM consulting division of Vertical Arts, a Colorado design firm with offices in Denver, Steamboat Springs, and Edwards. We are currently assisting my son's elementary school, University Prep, as they make preparations for in-person instruction. We have spent several weeks developing tools and workflows centered around PDF floor plans, CAD files, BIM files, and mobility simulation software.
Our workflows are based on 4 key objectives: safer classrooms, safer circulation, safer arrivals and dismissals, and safer air. Safer classrooms. VA Plus is using Autodesk Revit generative design and our own workspace density planning tool to develop safer classroom layouts that accommodate social distancing guidelines. Safer circulation. By implementing one-way corridors and not crossing cohorts, the protective effects of social distancing measures can be enhanced. Safer arrivals and dismissals. Using classroom loads and safer circulation, we can simulate student flow and help schools evaluate the need and benefits of staggered arrival and departure plans, and provide a framework for staffing demand and logistical communication requirements for implementing these plans effectively. And safer air. We are looking for mechanical engineers that can use components of our workspace density planning tool to integrate airflow analysis data into Autodesk Revit. Revit is a CAD BIM software package that architects and engineers routinely use. Our tool can be used to represent students, so an engineer can analyze the airflow and aerosol transmission potential with current HVAC and classroom layouts, and what mitigation options are available.
My son's school, like many schools that you're going to run into, didn't have a BIM model for their campus or anything like that. They simply had some pretty rough PDFs on some pretty small scale paper. What we're going to cover in this process is just what it's like to take in a PDF and essentially set up the minimum amount to be able to evaluate it. First, we'll go ahead and just open up a blank file and go get the PDF by going to Insert. Pick out the PDF. I like to change the resolution a little higher based upon it being a small scale PDF, so the size shouldn't be a problem. Drop in a reference line in here to be able to establish the scale, and then just to position it here to confirm that you've got everything correct. Once you're happy with the scale, you can go ahead and lock this file down by pinning it. Just double check it here real quick, make sure that, that matches up reasonably close to what we think is the right size. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to actually use room separation lines in rooms to draw out the minimum amount of information to allow us to do rooms. The reason to do rooms is it allows us to schedule per room and per level, and also per building. That way we can determine loads and understand the entire system. And also you saw in here that went ahead and just, I like to be able to see the rooms themselves. Just makes it more clear which ones I've actually gotten done. We'll move to another classroom here, and first thing we're going to do is you can see that we've just got a simple room tag. It's being driven by a comment to show how many students are in there, just to make it a little easier. Next, we'll go ahead and we'll just do a quick offset with some detail lines in the room, about 2 feet, just to imagine where students actually could get to. Then we'll go ahead and we'll start to we'll place the student in here, and then we'll go ahead and we'll array this student. And reasonably maybe get 4 in this row. Then let's go ahead, and what we'll do next is we'll go ahead and put in some circulation and make sure that we're spacing the students out correctly. And again, it's just using the inner circle as the person, in this case a teacher, so it's a little larger than the students since these are elementary school students, and then a 3-foot social distancing based on DPS's standards. And what we're doing here is we're just using some simple filtering on these views to make it easier to see the circulation versus the students. And we'll go ahead and add a couple more rows of students in here. Move them into place. So we've got achievable density in this layout, and establish that we've got enough circulation for the students to actually move around. And go ahead, in this particular classroom they'll have two teachers in it, and we can start to look at alternate ways of where we can put maybe some circulation for either the students to move around in, or enough room for teachers to actually have a desk and for some normal function as far as the chalkboard or whiteboard operations in the classroom. Next, you can kind of see what we've done with this is we went ahead and we set up a schedule to report what was going on in each one of the classrooms. And pretty simple parameters, just using a level, the room name, the description is something we use to filter, so we're only getting the students and not the teachers. And then went ahead and sorted it by level. That way we could get subtotals, and you could get a good sense of what you had at each floor. Next, we went ahead and printed off the sheets with the floor plans into PDFs. Brought them into Bluebeam where we marked them up and just indicated some loads as well as some one-way paths of travel. So to do the paths of travels, we simply just used a markup tool, the polyline, and had a arrow on one end just to indicate direction. So again, nothing too complicated here, but just allowed them to very easily see with some colorful visuals how it is that students would be able to circulate without mixing cohorts within the school. The dismissals were essentially a reversal of those same paths, since the cohorts aren't supposed to mix with one another, and we kept the arrivals and dismissals from the same doors.
Our workflow utilizes the generative design tool in Revit to create new classroom layouts. For this classroom, we will be generating a layout of student desks using a modification of the workspace layout script that comes with Revit's generative design tool. This allows us to explore configurations and find the upper limit of how many student desks can exist in the room while complying with social distancing guidelines. We have modified the generative design script to also place our workspace family in addition to station furniture. These workspace families are a representation of an occupancy point, which is common across our workflow and allows for both generative and manual placement to have identically accessible, machine-readable results that are managed and reportable through our Workspace Density Planning tool add-in, which also makes this data available for tools outside of Revit in the form of plain text files. In this project's case, the guidelines specify a radius of 3 feet for students and 6 feet for instructors. The social radius and inner human radius of workspace families can be adjusted in the family type, and multiple types can be used to represent different kinds of occupant stations, or to represent circulation nodes. Next, we generate layouts in the Revit Generative Design tool. Then select a desirable layout, and Generative Design places our workspace families in the model. A 6-foot radius workspace type is also manually placed to represent the occupancy point for the instructor. But in order to represent the higher mobility of this role, which must have access to the student workspaces, we will also place circulation nodes, which can be created as a type in the same workspace family by enabling the circulation parameter. This can signal to other tools, such as the Workspace Density Planning tool, other add-ins, or Dynamo scripts, that the instances of this type are to be evaluated as a passage with revolving occupancy, which does not count towards occupancy totals of a room. Circulation nodes are placed in the aisles created by the Generative Design script's layout. and we run the Workspace Density Planning tool to create a report. This process is performed for all the classrooms at the school. The passing workspace family instances will inform the final occupant counts for each classroom that are used downstream in InfraWorks mobility simulation in order to create a mobility study.
Mobility Simulator in Autodesk's InfraWorks was the perfect tool for us to use to validate our proposal. We were able to simulate our specific dismissal plan and see if it met our client's goals and COVID-19 guidelines. The tool has enabled our clients to really visualize the dismissal plan and promote a more informed conversation leading to the best solution path. Benefits of using Mobility Simulator include showing how long dismissal and arrival will take, showing the length of each student trip, showing if social distancing is being met, and representing the traffic density at the pickup zone. Using the dismissal plan PDF outline, a network is created in Mobility Simulator to simulate the dismissal sequence. Classrooms are represented by areas, as well as the bus stop and pedestrian pickup zones. This allows us to route students from all the classrooms to the bus stop, the pedestrian pickup zones, as well as to the vehicle pickup zone based on real data provided by the school district. Social distancing is simulated by increasing the space parameter for people to the social distancing radius, as well as by adjusting the capacity of walkways to their length divided by social distancing radius. We wanted to show the bus dismissal taking place before the rest of the student dismissal to reduce corridor load. So we set up some additional terms and demand profiles, allowing us to stagger the dismissal of groups of students. Many school layouts will lead to conditions where there are multiple routes which connect destinations. This can be helpful in simulating typical situations where people will make choices more randomly, but for our purposes, we want all of the students to follow their dedicated paths, helping avoid collisions. We utilized the route spreading tool to eliminate deviation from the main paths. This tool is also used to test the network and make sure routes are connected and functioning as planned. We wanted to use the simulation to show the potential impact our plan would have on the vehicle queue for pickup, so we incorporated the vehicle pickup into our simulation. We have a group of cars assigned to fill up the pickup lot over the simulation time. As students arrive at the pickup lot, they will get into a waiting car and leave. We increased the time for students to get in the car to help simulate additional time the cars will be waiting in the parking stalls. To evaluate the simulation, we utilized the information shown in the Analysis tab, which gives a summary of trips with times and distances. We then reviewed the walking reports, which show individual trip times and distances, and the level of service, which shows if spacing is being met on all walkways. These tools can show that the client's goals are being met and their concerns addressed regarding the time for dismissal and the ability to enforce social distancing. Mobility Simulator can be used to solve a range of problems related to getting students safely back to school, from arrival sequences in class transition sequences to simulations for middle and high schools, as well as parking in class transition simulations at universities. Hi, my name is Adam Johnson, and I'm a BIM specialist at VA+. Today I'm going to show you some basic tools, workflows, and techniques to help you get started using Autodesk's Mobility Simulator. Autodesk Mobility Simulator is part of Autodesk's InfraWorks and is included with the AEC package. Wanting to learn more about this powerful software that our company already has access to, I spent just under 2 weeks working with Mobility Simulator to learn how it works and to explore how it could be used to improve architects' workflows and help them better solve their clients' problems. After learning the basics of the software, I began to explore how Mobility Simulator could be used to evaluate back-to-school procedures and help improve students and students' families' safety as schools are beginning to reopen during the COVID-19 pandemic. To get started, we are going to launch Autodesk InfraWorks to begin using Mobility Simulator. Open an InfraWorks project. It can be any project. Once we are in Mobility Simulator, we will start a new file anyway. And once we are in the model, we need to draw a traffic study area. Go to the Analyze tab, click on the Transportation drop-down, and then Mobility Simulator. This will then prompt you to draw a traffic study area by defining the corners of a polygon. Once you have drawn your shape, hit Enter, and then right-click within the area and select Mobility Simulator. This will launch the mobility simulation software. Please note that you will need to have a Java runtime environment or a JRE installed on your machine in order for this program to function. Once the software is open, go to File, New, and select Cancel when the wizard opens. This is our interface for Mobility Simulator. You can orbit with the left mouse button, pan with the right, and zoom in and out using the scroll wheel. Before we do any modeling, we need to make sure that we are in orthographic mode by hitting the O key. We also need to turn on some layers so that we see everything we need to as we are modeling. In the Layers tab, ensure that Walk Center Lines, Walk Connections, Handle End, and Handle Other are highlighted. Finally, select the top of the view cube to orient to a planned view. Now that our interface is set up, we are going to create a simple simulation in which we have pedestrians walking from an origin to a destination. Zoom in until the cursor length is about 50 feet. Right-click, click Walkway, and select New Walkway at Cursor. A window will open where you can input the length, width, as well as the name of your walkway. You will notice that the default length is set to the length of the cursor. We will make our walkway 6 feet wide and select OK. I'm going to add another leg to the walkway at an angle. If you deselect the walkway, you can rotate the view using the right mouse button. Then we will position the cursor just above our existing walkway and create a new walkway at the cursor again. Our simulation will need at least 2 walkways to function correctly. Another way to achieve this is by selecting your walkway with the middle mouse button, right-clicking, clicking Walkway, and selecting Bisect. This will divide your walkway up into 2 pieces connected by a walkway connection. Next, we are going to select the endpoints of our walkway, right-click, Walkways, New Connection to join them together. Next, we need to add areas. These are where people will originate from, as well as where they will travel to. To place an area, pan your model until the cursor is just above a walkway endpoint. Right-click, New Area at Cursor. It is critical that your area is connected to the walkway. You know they are connected if the walkway highlights when the area is selected. Also, if you select the walkway, it will indicate which area it is a part of. Do the same to place an area at the other end of your walkway. Save your model after creating your areas. This will force the program to correctly recognize the areas. With our network in place, we are going to move on to setting up the parameters and the demands for our simulation. First, we are going to set up the term for our simulation. Go to Parameters, Terms, and this will open up the Simulation Term window. Currently, this is set to run from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Let us adjust this time to be from 8 to 8:30. Now we are going to add some person types. Go to Parameters, Person Types. Click on the plus button to add a person type. Then we can adjust their name, the color of their avatar, and some additional parameters. In the other tabs of this window, we can adjust other aspects of the person type, including their speed and other physical attributes. We can also create groupings of person types as well. Let us create another person type with a different color. Now say there are 80% of the first person type and 20% of the second. To show this in our simulation, go to Demand, Demand Divisions, and then input the percentages for Division 1. This means that demand created from Division 1 will include the input ratio of person types. Now that our parameters are set up, we are going to set up our demand. This is what will inform the simulation how many people are moving between the origins and destinations. Go to Demand and then Demands. This will open the demand editor. Click on the green plus button to add a new demand matrix. Ensure that Division 1 is selected and hit OK. This creates a matrix with all of our areas represented at each axis, one being origins, the other destinations. When you click on a box in the matrix, an arrow will appear in your model which shows the origins and destination as well as the direction of the trip you have selected. Let us add 200 people moving from one area to the next. Now that our demand is set up and trips have been generated, we are ready to begin the simulation. In the Simulation tab at the right of your screen, click on the green plus icon. This will create a new simulation with our current parameters and demands active. With the new simulation selected, click on the light bulb icon. This will make this the active simulation. Click on the play button to begin the simulation. You will now see your agents begin to complete their trips. Mobility simulation has many additional features that will allow you to simulate multimodal transit, pedestrian crossings, parking times, elevators, and much more complex networks to simulate real-world problems. Hopefully, this demonstration has provided a footing for you to get started using Mobility Simulator and help bring the power of this AEC included tool to your clients.
All right, we're nearing the end of this. So again, it took us a little while to kind of figure these pieces out. So if you need help, obviously reach out to us, and we would be certainly grateful to help anybody help their local schools, things like that, to be able to do this. We also going through here, we have a add-in that we have developed.
Hi, I'm John Resch, and I'm the BIM engineer at VA+. This is a preview of an add-in we're currently developing for linking Revit content into Infoworks Mobility Simulator. There are a number of benefits we have found to bridging these two environments, chiefly reducing the need to recreate or redraw content that already exists. By making the use of Mobility Simulator more accessible to Revit users, this enables mobility simulation to be used in more design decisions in existing BIM-centric workflows. And by bridging the concepts of mobility as a system into Revit, this also creates an interoperability path. Now let's take a look at how this looks from a usage standpoint in Revit. For ordinary rooms, you place a room controller family within the boundaries of the room. This tells the add-in to sample and categorize the room in order to model it as a mobility simulator area, and the add-in will create a segment between it and the nearest door for typical cases. Next, we're going to create a corridor using another type of the controller family. This is where things get exciting. Segments and joins are the backbone of a mobility simulation model, and our algorithm generates these segments from corridors, doors, and openings. Infoworks Mobility Simulator understands these blue segments as channels and green joins as courses. Next, we set up an elevator or lift stop for this floor plan's level by placing a lift type of the controller family, and set the direction parameter for the direction of access. Then we create another corridor to represent the elevator lobby. Next, we create another corridor in the core of this tower model, which happens to have access to stairs. This time we place the stairs type of the controller family, which tells the add-in to sample the stairs inside the Revit room and generate a more complex equivalent structure in Mobility Simulator. We also add a vestibule for those stairs. For larger, more complex rooms, there will be a need to represent a sub-network that permits connections through the room between doors and subrooms. For this, we place one room type controller family near each door, and subroom type controllers within each subroom. This tells the add-in to analyze the room as both a corridor and as a destination, which can participate in the mobility simulator's demand matrix. The resulting lines and families can then be exported to a mobility simulator save file, populating it with mobility objects proportional to and representative of the mobility network of a floor plan's layout, so its usage can be simulated in greater detail.
So in here, what we're showing, we also, if you go to the Autodesk App Store, our social distancing tool, this add-in that works with Revit, is also available there for free. And it's just, again, just showing a couple things you've already seen, but where it's available. That's really all our presentation. If anybody's got any questions or anything like that, Adam, myself, and John are all here available to answer anything people might have questions about.
Thanks, Brian. We'll bring Adam and John back up for some questions, and super informative. I'll get it kicked off with questions while the panelists or the presenters, not same thing, sorry, attendees get some questions coming into us. But I have to say I have a personal interest in schools reopening. I've been relegated to the bunker here because my home is filled with the sounds of first graders. My wife teaches, and they've been remote for a couple of weeks now. So I hope the sooner the better on this. So what I like about what you guys have done is that people already have this. If they're using pretty standard software tools in their firms with any particular client type, they probably already have a lot of this at their disposal already.
Yeah, it's there now. Documentation on and learning Infoworks, it's really meant for civil engineers. So you can imagine that even its interface and thought process is almost completely backwards, it seems like, just kind of how engineering and we kind of tend to go. So the interface is not very clear. We had to actually reach out to Autodesk, who was very helpful with it, to explain how some things worked. And I said, even, getting to the little video that we put in here where Adam explains how even just to kind of get started and what are some of the important things for what we were doing, took a few different sort of shots at them to get it sort of the gaps filled in. So I don't think Infoworks is very well known. It's, like I said, mainly meant for drainage, bridge design, things like that. And it happens to have this mobility simulation within it. And so we kind of almost circumvent the main, software frame to get to this small piece within it. And also the other add-in that we've been working with is getting geometry more easily from Revit into Infoworks. We found that to be a little bit challenging. So there's a few things that it wouldn't be super easy for a architectural firm to, on a normal billable rate, be able to say, okay, we're going to adopt this software, we're going to do this, because it would have some unknowns that, we took essentially the COVID sort of downtime and switching between clients and things like that, and just said, well, I don't want to be bored in this. We're trying to, push our BIM consulting out there. This is something we think, should grab headlines. Is something that's needed. I have a personal interest in it as well. So that's kind of how we went with it. And like I said, Adam, it's been a good 2 weeks going back and forth to get that part. Well, John developed more of the add-in and some of the generative tools to deal with social distancing and evaluating social distancing. And then I, just being old school guy, used them in Revit and in PDF form to lay out and think through and have discussions with UPrep as far as how is their operations. And a lot of it comes down to staffing as well. So just being able to have social distancing is one thing. Being able to think about one-way routing is certainly, schools are set up in a way that usually there's a path through it, if you will, that you can figure it out. But oftentimes it's going to require alternate entrances being used either for arrival and dismissal. Thinking about, again, for UPrep, all the arrivals and dismissals, they're segregated amongst grades, but they're the same for arrival and dismissal. So parents and students, familiarity, get the ability to kind of actually execute it. Worked with another middle school manual, McCullough manual, walked through their operations and the idea of, again, how to even cycle through and look at timeframes of people going to the bathroom, people maybe using a science lab to wash hands to do their every 2 hours. There's a lot of weird little cycles that start to take time when you take, 60 to 120 students and things like that, that it's somewhat just doing simple math, but sort of mapping it out is kind of what came to light as we worked with the educators to try to figure out boots on the ground, real operations, because we could simulate stuff all day long, but they needed to get it. They needed to understand what they were going to do and what they might be looking for as far as bottlenecks and headaches and things like that.
So I love that you basically hacked the software rather than coming up with a whole new or shopping for something else. How did you stumble on Infoworks? Even though it wasn't designed obviously for this feature, what was that light bulb moment where, hey, I think this could work?
And looking at too many emails. Autodesk sent me an email about some of these other pieces of software. I think just fishing for sales and things like that. I mean, we're already hook, line, and sinker in. It's not anything more we can really buy. But they showed a small video and showed it being used in an office building. And we're like, well, that's pretty cool. How do we do that? And went back and forth and realized that we needed some help connecting the dots. And I just relentlessly pursued a resource until I got it, and got on somebody that was passionate about it, a guy named Edmundo, all the way down in I think Florida, and he walked us through what they had been doing and what he had kind of developed, and we've kind of pushed and done a few things with it they hadn't thought of with it. So it's flexible enough to get that out, but it was really just kind of a random thing because we first came up with the whole social distancing piece, and again, have put it out for free for quite a while, thinking that it at least would help people visualize what it's like to start laying out their current operations. Because, even with our own operation here, we're, 25% of us are back in the office here. We have a pretty big office, so it's able to be worked. But the idea of like remodeling your whole office didn't seem very realistic. We thought, the first thing we'd want to do is look at everything you have, figure out where your conflicts are, and start to develop a game plan for there. So we started in an office kind of complex, thought, well, we're not getting tons of traction with this. Maybe not a lot of people are doing this. And I looked at my own need and said, well, schools need something. Then we ran into Infoworks. And so, since we've been in this pandemic, it just felt like a natural place to take our problem solving sort of mentality, especially with our interest in technology, and go hammer out some workflows that we thought we could share with people.
And this was developed, sounds like, within the user community itself, where you found another person who,
Edmundo's another Autodesk employee. I don't know the nature of exactly how they're structured with that. So we haven't actually run into any other, I guess what you call normal users of it so far. We've demonstrated it to a lot of people, but I don't know how many people have taken the leap to really start to try to implement it.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask, so in your case, you had an in with the school, and for lack of a better term, you had a student that was in the school. How did you navigate approaching the school? Who did you talk to? Based on that experience, what would you recommend about, okay, if you're a firm that has an interest in being of service, it's not just the willingness to do it and the skills to map it out. It's a path that needs to be navigated, especially if there's a firm that might have a relationship with that school already.
Right, and frankly, that's where I would expect people to start, is the relationships that they have, because and chances are, what I found anyway, is I had to sort of bully my way into this for them as well, because they were trying to implement remote learning, had a lot of variables kind of going on. So these people are stressed in odd environments, already have a lot of things going. And the next thing, if it's not on fire and in their lab, they already have things on fire and in their lab. So I just had to make it important enough for them to consider earlier, maybe than they had even planned on somewhat. I mean, they were certainly already pivoting that way, but I just based on my own perspective, structured a different look at it, and kind of gave them some framework. So I happened to, go and pick my son up as things were kind of evolving, picking up, materials for remote learning that I was already doing. And I took that opportunity to reach out to one of the operations people there. And so he got me in touch with Alistair Dawes, who is the COO, the Chief Operating Officer of their 2 campuses. And he was like, well, we're starting this, so this is perfect timing, and kind of went there. Other things we've pursued is, we relentlessly pursued you guys to see if we could kind of get this out here this way. We've reached out to the school board with very limited effect. We tracked down, pre-approved list of engineers and architects that DPS had, and unsolicited, sent people stuff like, hey, we know how to do these things. I think connecting with facilities, as well as people in the actual school. So DPS, they essentially are the landlord for most schools, and they operate the building, operate the mechanical systems, things like that, and provide a lot of resources there. But then the schools actually operate those buildings as far as staffing, in-person pieces, and things like that. And so there's kind of more than one head to try to reach out to. So we've knocked on a lot of doors, but again, right now, we haven't seen a lot of people willing to understand it and take the next steps with this. We feel like there's a lot of different levels to it too. I mean, and just even the sense of just taking a floor plan and mapping out how many students you may be able to have, is one thing. We did with UPrep find that we could put a theoretical number there, and it really does rely on not 100% capacity. This is not a normal way of staffing a classroom or putting students in the classroom. And so as those numbers came back to UPrep, we had to kind of help them adjust and figure out, like, okay, how's the community feeling about in-person? Who's going to actually send their kid, and kind of make some adjustments from there. But the routing and door selection and staffing, as far as where could they put teachers so that they didn't have sort of an unsupervised zone, unsupervised route, and things like that, we're all somewhat static. So, I think for what we found, it's certainly a lot of work to kind of get on people's radar to say there's a way to help and do that. I don't think schools are thinking that they have budget or time. And so far, we've done everything just pro bono to get our name out there and show that we have the ability to think outside the box to the design community and our community as a whole, is really our self-interest in it. So.
Well, it must help coming with a more or less turnkey solution. You're not knocking on the door and saying, we want access to your school so we can, build something. You can show them something that's already built. That only needs the permission of that district and their own documents.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure there's some additional things, like each school is going to have a few more or a few less requirements as far as things they're trying to solve or trying to understand. But I think as much as anything, what we saw with this, and we used this at UPrep to give them something to wrap their heads around, kind of get an idea of like, how would they do it, show some simulations. And then we also used it in some parent meetings prior to signing up for in-person or remote, and this to essentially give them some peace of mind that it had been thought out in a way that they could see. And so, community adoption, communication, transparency, things like that are all pretty important. So we felt like it had the ability to be a good presentation tool to bring people on board as well.
So a lot of schools, I would imagine, don't have excess space that have been built into it. So if a school decides to come back and 100% of the students want to be there, that may not work under the distancing guidelines, but it could work if you have a hybrid approach where not every student is back and the teacher has some of the instruction face-to-face and some of it at the same time is live streaming to the folks who are at home and remote working.
That was a solution path we were talking with the middle school with. Again, middle school and high school gets exponentially more difficult because of curriculum, mobility of students, things like that. And the middle school, they were trying to essentially establish cohorts and narrow down choices and say, okay, you're going to have these type of classes. Because what we found even with UPrep and elementary, where it should be a little simpler, they're still rotating through several teachers. So the teachers are moving around, the students in the cohorts really aren't going any places, but you end up again with things to solve about hand washing, going to the bathroom, breakfast and lunch, recess movement, things like that. You end up running into how can you develop schedules so that you can reasonably teach it. We found that the remote and online simultaneous mostly hasn't been exactly how it's been. And so that's produced another demand in staffing. We don't show much of that with our stuff, but we do start to give a start point to have the discussion about how they're wrapping their heads around about where does someone physically need to be a part of, you know, the staffing solution. But it, you know, it's fairly complex. And like I said, you know, once you get up into like high school, you know, it gets even worse as far as what kind of approaches do they have. So yeah, with the fact that winter is really coming to Colorado, and you know, everybody can't just be outside, these hybrid solutions sound nice when you start them out, but they do take significant planning.
Mhm. Yeah. So what does a firm need to start with? I'm thinking if you've got a pre-existing relationship with the school, you probably have documentation, maybe even built out in digital format. If not that, hopefully some as-built drawings. But what if it's a school that hasn't been touched in a long time? What would you need to get that started?
Like what we got with UPrep, we got 8.5 by 11 PDFs. They were pretty rough, and I matched them up to scale with what I could find on Google Map. So there was a level of accuracy there that we then looked at a couple things to kind of test it. If you couldn't get any documentation to sketch it out, I would say faster wise, but again, it's a funding issue, is going in and scanning it. You know, we've done that with a few things, not in this particular process, but other as-built conditioning and things like that, going through and just LiDAR scan it in, drag it into Revit. That way you can have some sense of where those pieces are. Otherwise, you're spending time where, again, it's difficult to have physical access for very long. So scanning is faster as far as don't spend too much time on site. But, you know, we were looking at, for the most part, because we don't own equipment with that, we just rent it, that you're probably talking about somewhere around $500 a day cost just to have the equipment, plus somebody on site, you know, in that time frame. So there's a little bit of a cost there. Again, if you can find a way to recoup that in or position it with accountants to eat it, you know, or something like that, there's that acquisition.
Did you run into any issues with egress or fire circulation? I would imagine not, because you're not increasing the load. You're just
we're dropping the load, and so didn't see anything that told me that that would be an issue. And quite frankly, because it's already built, and there's no approval process to submit where a desk laid out sort of plan.
Yeah.
And for the most part, everything is about less density. So the hardest part was figuring out when we had collections of students and things like that for dealing with how they were doing busing, since elementary school students in DPS are the only ones getting bused at all. And student, you know, like parent pickup or walking home. And the idea of, you know, could we demonstrate a way to separate cohorts but still use a cafeteria or a gym? For the most part, DPS really didn't want to have that happen, so that was kind of in their guidelines. But we showed how potentially it could work if they got into that discussion.
Yeah. So you're thinking of how do we eliminate bottlenecks at peak times or congregating in larger groups?
Yeah, that was part of that's what the simulations allowed us to show, was even though the simulations are a little still concocted, trying to figure out how to like demonstrate what actually happens. So at UPrep, you arrive as a parent, and then at each one of their checkpoints, they enter a student number. That student is told to go to their designated dismissal, if you want, and then they go up. So we put time in there for that, you know, arrive, call, and arrive piece to then get into the car to simulate how long would typical student cycles be, and would that start to develop a backlog into, you know, traffic and things like that. Having seen it in progress for a few weeks now at UPrep, they start their dismissal processes right around 1:55, 2 o'clock, and they're typically done by 2:15. So it's spaced out, it's flowing pretty well, and it's probably outperforming some of our more conservative pieces we put in the simulations.
Yeah. And you said there's no permitting or inspections involved in this type of work.
Well, you're not making any physical alterations to the building or anything like that. It's simply, it'd be akin to less than painting a wall in a classroom. You just move a desk. And so because you're dropping load in all cases, everything that as an architect I'd be worried about is less of an issue. And all the rest of it is, again, giving suggestions about how to not have people, cross over and have cohorts mix, things like that, just to give them an option of just visualizing their solutions. And again, we did it in such a manner where, there's not really even drawings or things that we handed over. We simply talked through sort of the solutions, looked at some things. And so to a certain extent, I suppose in a worst case scenario, there might be some liability to this, but I would think it would be one of these things where, one, we've kind of set it up where we're just helping them figure stuff out. We're using their resources, and there's nothing to stamp and sign.
Right.
And, good luck to the judge that sues me over this.
Yeah.
So that was how we viewed most of that.
Yeah, these aren't sealed documents. So who ultimately ends up implementing these? You hand the tool, the visualization tools over. Probably, you're not dealing in some cases with people that have the same access to those models. Is it the on-site staff typically?
Yeah, it's 100% of, again, the couple cases that we've actually interacted with, the two campuses for University Prep, Steele and Wrapup, as well as McAuliffe Manual, we simply talked through it. We actually didn't leave anything at all. We used it to demonstrate what we were talking about, but for the most part, they've got their own plans where they're trying to say, okay, this teacher is here, that teacher is there, here's our time schedules, things like that. So they have a lot of things that they're internally already used to. And so you're essentially kind of helping them see blind spots in their documentation process and what they're not thinking about. So it's really more of a onboarding, hey, I believe you, I can see it, and prove it out, and let them be more sort of secure with the documentation and the way they'd have to turn things in anyway.
Yeah. Have you had an instance yet where the school has reopened for in-person classroom, and then either a part of it or all of it has had to shut down because of an exposure, and then they came back again, and maybe that informed a change in the layout or the circulation?
No, so the middle school never reopened. They kind of got close to that and then felt like no worse, and so they kept, DPS everything, they kept kicking it down sort of the road. UPrep has, looking at the dashboards, things like that, I think they had maybe 1 or 2 cases in total, as far as what the DPS dashboard shows. And they're going through this week, and then they're going to switch to remote, and then winter break up until January 10th. So far as I can tell, it feels like the number of parents that were willing to send their kids has dropped a bit as the numbers have gone up in the community and people have become more concerned about it. So the load is going to drop there. And for the most part, UPrep, at least at the Arapahoe campus that I interact with every day and will in an hour, has got it down pretty well. It feels like it flows pretty well, and I haven't heard of any problems, anything like that. I really think a lot of it has to do with, and again, low density. And it appears, for the luck of the community, that youngsters are maybe a little less susceptible and a little more resilient with it. So no doctor, but so far we've gotten away with it mostly. But I think it's really down to density. It's really about finding a way to not have tons of people on campus at once, and not have tons of parents picking up at the same time, things like that.
Do you think this is going to change how schools are designed going forward?
Well, I think it depends upon how this disease and our society around it evolves. I mean, if this becomes, a flu that we never get rid of, possibly. I think those changes are going to be more difficult to implement. The idea of, again, changing how HVAC works is not an easy thing to do, especially since this is an airborne disease. I think the idea of a state that continually seems to drop its educational dollars and adding more infrastructure seems to be an equation that doesn't make any sense to me. So the idea of changing that around, I think we're seeing, like we are in our industry even, more adoption to being able to handle remote and understand how to supplement and do things that maybe allow us to, have more people taught in a way they're comfortable with, things like that. So there's a little flexibility, but at the same time, I think we're also seeing that there's a lot of thing about the way society already worked that we do want to return to, that is valuable. And, once we get back through all of this, all the things that are almost backwards to this, as far as school safety and all these other things, are they're tough to reconcile. So having better indoor air quality, having better energy efficiency to allow that better air quality, I think these will hopefully be lasting things that we're able to change and make use of. But I think they'll be subtle. I think the idea of classroom layouts and other changes, I'd be surprised if this is lasting, and unless we can't medically, overcome this, and I think that will be a very difficult drain on society that we'd better figure out a way through. And I don't think that constantly being sort of separated from each other is long-term viable.
Yeah, well, we've probably hit pause on some of these community-oriented spaces where they do double duty as both a stairway and maybe an assembly type of thing. But I would be disappointed if those went away for good, just because we decided we don't want to risk it. But maybe it accelerates some of the things we've seen with natural ventilation and more exposure to daylighting and those kind of things. So it's a mixed bag, right? Good and bad could come out of this. And I think you're right. It depends on, is this a long-term thing that we deal with every year, or something that we just have to get through?
Yeah. And I think there's other things as far as resiliency with buildings and changing climate and a lot of other things that we're likely to see more physical manifestations of that are more obvious than this, like I said, unless we find ourselves medically unable to conquer this. Mm-hmm. If buildings are the answer to this, I think we're in for a very long and troubled trip.
Yeah. Well, this has been a really informative presentation, and I know you've worked really hard on this starting back in August when schools were gearing up. Just for folks watching today, Brian reached out to us way back then and said, hey, just as a parent and an architect, I've been thinking about this problem, what solutions can be brought to it, and I want to share it with the rest of the architecture community. So we're very grateful for you doing that, and want to see more of it. This is a service that architects can provide to their school clients, and VA Plus and Autodesk and all these other companies have provided a service to the design community to help adapt the tools that are already out there for this school clientele as they navigate these challenging times. So it's not an unsolvable problem. You've seen in the video some ways that it has been solved for just a few schools, but everybody could use a conversation. Good luck. I hope everybody listening today has the ability to reach out to someone at a school that they've got a relationship with and say, before you reopen, we want to help. We can show you, your staff, we can be a resource on a parent meeting, just so you know that these are educated choices that are being made, that has been informed by an architectural perspective. So I want to thank you for doing that for your school, and also providing some tools for other people that want to have that conversation.
Sure. No, I said, yeah, if anybody knows of a way to, we'll have this posted up on our website and our LinkedIn page. So you'll be able to watch the video that we did. I don't know if AIA is going to provide a recorded version of this, or if there's any way to link back to that. I provided you guys with most of the links. So if there's a way to keep being able to find the solutions that we have as people get potentially maybe interested in it, we're here, and we're certainly willing to help people out and see what we can do.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brian, and your colleagues, Adam and Jonathan, for the good work. And we want to let everybody else know that we've got just a couple more virtual connects for the year. The next one is December 2nd, and that's on sustainable design with redwood timbers. That's going to be presented by Humboldt Sawmill Company. And last week, we reopened our Practice and Design Conference portal, which had a whole bunch of content over 3 days. You can now register to view those recordings on demand online and receive credit for those. Once this credit gets approved by national We're going to probably, your next availability for that, if you want to tell your colleagues who didn't get a chance, we'll have it on our YouTube channel for people to see that and get credit as well from AI. So thanks again. We'll see you next time, and VA Plus team, well done. Take care.